Vigorous Steve here. This is part 2 of episode 3 of the Vigorous Brain and Gains podcast with myself and Dr. Dave Maconi. We do an episode every year or so. You can find part 1 on his YouTube channel. I'll link it down below. But if you like things out of order and you prefer movies like Memento or Pulp Fiction, why don't you stick around for part 2 right here on this YouTube channel? Timestamps are down below so you can skip ahead to your favorite segment. And then when you're done with this part, you can head over to the Brain and Gains podcast YouTube channel and watch part 1 kind of in reverse. Thank you guys so much for your support. Vigorous crew, you guys know what to do. A front double bicep for you guys. Much love, much appreciation. I hope you enjoy this video and this collaboration. Steve out. And everybody thought I was crazy, but that's to this date still the best cycle I've ever done. Test, GH, and insulin.
Test is best, right?
Best freaking dude. My lipids were beautiful, right? My HDL was 50, my LDL was 110, total cholesterol nicely in range. That's without any real lipid management, no statin, no ezetimibe. I didn't even know about ezetimibe at the time. So that's just citrus bergamot and fish oil with each meal, and cardio and healthy eating. My liver enzymes were beautiful. My blood pressure was normal. I took a little bit of Cialis to keep that under control. It was the easiest and most productive cycle I've ever did. Test, GH, and insulin. That's why I wrote a whole ebook about it, because I reproduced that cycle with many of my clients, and they hire me for all the drug secrets, and then you put them on such a basic cycle, and they're pissed.
Yeah, right.
This is not what I want. I want the Tremboloni sandwich. I want the Anivore. I want the this and that and fast-acting insulin. No. Start with this, and let's see in 3 months. And they blow up, and their blood work is beautiful.
That's kind of how it is, like, with even just when I prescribe people training, and nobody really complains. But, I think sometimes with the clients that I get, they come to me because they're frustrated, obviously, with lack of progress. That's almost always why they come. And they're like, well, I was doing this, like, I won't say the name, but, this person gave me this routine or this really complicated thing. And I start them pretty basic. I don't always slash volume, but a lot of times I do. And I think there's a surprise there. And I'm like, look, just give it a month and then we'll see what happens. We'll adjust. And then lo and behold, I haven't made strength gains like this in years. And it's like, well, because you've taken away some stress of, this anxiety of deciding.
Drunk volume.
A lot of volume. And I mean, I very rarely had somebody who's like, oh, this just isn't working. It's usually a pretty quick response. But same thing. I'm just saying you start basic, and a lot of it, especially if you're coaching somebody, it's how are we adjusting week to week, month to month, not just like, hey, here's this. That's why I don't love like just generic templates to give people. I think they're fine in a lot of cases, but just to say like, hey, here's this, and now you're set. I think you got to be able to adapt.
No, you got to adapt. My programs were always personalized. That's why it took sometimes a week to write them out. And then, when you get multiple applications per week, you just, programming so much. But then when they get it, it's perfect from the start, and they can follow it for 2 or 3 months. And then they get upset that there's no adjustments. I said, well, it's still working. So what are you complaining about?
Exactly.
It was good from the start. This is not a cookie cutter protocol that we have to adjust every week. This is a good protocol that we don't have to adjust. So, and then, if the client is really hammering on it, okay, you make some arbitrary adjustments for the sake of making adjustments. So they extend, just a common business practice as a coach. You don't have to change anything, but otherwise the client gets upset. So you have to work with their mental capacity more than their
psychology.
Psychology.
Are
right.
we doing anything this week? It's like, like you said, it's still working. You want to change what's working? Like,
So I would just make small changes and then say, oh, this looks great. And then they go try it, and they could have done the same thing, but the people like a little bit of change. Plus they pay. So if there's no changements for a whole month, then they're wondering like, why am I paying hundreds of dollars just to do the same thing over and over again? So, okay. So that's a little bit of a strategy. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. You just have to, go with the customer and or the client. And if the client gets a little bit edgy and impatient, okay, you change something for the sake of keeping the client.
Yeah, sure.
I'm not coaching anymore, by the way. So,
Oh, really?
No, I stopped. Honestly, I stopped after this Liver King debacle 1.5 years ago.
Well, I guess you did. I remember seeing your email recently, and I guess you do consultations still, but you don't.
I just still do consultations and mentorships. Mentorships are way more involved. Like general bodybuilding coaching, that's like a weekly check-in, a couple of messages during the week. But most of it, after the initial, introductory phase, most of it is just weekly check-ins, adjustments, see you later, weekly check-ins, adjustments, and that shouldn't cost that much. It's a couple $100 a month.
Yeah.
But mentorship is basically taking a natural with subclinical testosterone levels that wants to get their hands dirty, but is too busy due to work, from start to finish. So, you come to me, you have your blood work ready, and you see that your testosterone is low, right? And your diet is not so good. It's just basically taking beginners through their hormone journey. And then by the end of 6 months, they say, hey, here's your diploma. Congratulations. You know everything about your body, or sometimes 4 months. And they're on their way and they got knowledge for life. So it's way more expensive because it's literally chatting the whole day. What about this? What about that? How do I do injections? Okay, let's jump on a call and I'll show you how to reconcentrate your growth hormone and how to inject and where to inject. Don't worry if there's a little bit of blood. All the little small things that when you get started with hormones, you don't really know about. Or these guys, they're so busy with business that they just don't have time to do the research. So they'd rather hire me at a premium so that I'm always on standby and always available. So you basically have a secretary, or a handyman ready in case there's a problem, which arises multiple times per day. And once, after a while, the questions kind of die out and they're good at a good place in life, their libido is good, their health is good, they have a six pack, everything is managed. Then at one point I say, you know what, I think you're good to go. You can, I release you from your, mentorship program, and they move on. And then, maybe once every 6 months we do a consultation just to top them up. But that's very
a great way to do it.
That's very, it's like a crash course into pharmacology and everything they need to know. And we do monthly blood work, and it's very involving, but that's why it's a little bit more expensive than regular bodybuilding coaching.
Yeah. I do think I tell people, I think the vast majority of people should stay natural, in my opinion. But if you are going to do something, whether it's, TRT or obviously, anything beyond that, you should know what you're doing, because it's almost like what they say with, I don't know, like sex ed and everything. It's like, look, if you're 14, 15, you probably should be having sex, but we're going to teach it in high school, because if you're going to do it, make sure you're doing it safe. And some people are just going to do steroids. Like they're going to, and you can put out the education. You can say, look, you probably shouldn't for this reason. But also, if you're going to, do it as safe as possible. Get this blood work, maybe get this imaging, which nobody gets imaging, all these things like that,
So, but that's only something of the last 4 to 5 years. It's because of channels like me and Derek and your channel and a couple others, highly intelligent people that always hammer it into the audience. Even the guys that are drug-free, they still hammer the blood work and the healthy eating and the organ imaging. But that's only a select few. And 10 years ago when I started, that wasn't around. You go to steroid.com, the forum, first cycle, 500 milligrams a test, the anabolic kickstart, and good luck, right?
Yeah, right.
If you get gyno, he takes a Nolvadex, right? So, so it has evolved so much. And I'm honestly a little bit jealous of the guys that get their hands dirty now or decide not to take it based on the information that is out there now. Because we didn't have that opportunity. That's why I'm trying to give back. And that's why you're trying to give back after you've been bodybuilding for over a decade also, right?
I've been lifting since I was 12, so 18, 19 years.
20 years. So, you've learned so much along the way, and that's highly valuable. So if you had a time machine and your 12-year-old self could watch you talk about training then, and, so many mistakes wouldn't have been made, or maybe your physique would have looked so much better earlier on.
Probably earlier, right?
Yeah, you would have reached your natural potential at like 18. You're like, man,
right?
Screw this. I'm gonna go in the sauce.
Do you think you would have not gone on gear if you could do it over again?
No, I would have still gotten on gear.
You still would have gone on
probably earlier. Yeah, probably.
Really?
Earlier. Yeah. So look at it this way. So when I was 26, I was making good gains, right? But after a while, you get a little bit bored of making no gains. Now, again, I could have done a lot better, but I was, working full time as a consultant and making like 80-hour weeks sometimes, being highly stressed. It's also very deleterious to your gains. So if I was a full time bodybuilder, let's say I was, 24 now, and I would have social media and the pressure of social media. Yeah, I would have started earlier, and I would have milked that opportunity to the max.
Yeah.
because I didn't have that opportunity of social media to make money. But if I were 24 or 22 now, document everything I could do drug-free for 5 years, and then document the steroid journey under guidance, and I would milk it, and I would bank, but keep it 100% legit. So I'll be
I
honest
think
about taking something.
it's so different now. You made the analogy earlier to like Tinder and whatnot. And so like when I was in college, basically that stuff came out right after I finished college.
Yeah.
And same thing, like Instagram was getting big right around that time. I didn't have an Instagram for a long time, but I can only imagine like being in high school now or college now with the amount of social media and dating apps and all these things, like just the influx. And like honestly, I feel like I would have been so tempted in high school if I
Yeah.
knew it was even an option. Like I didn't know that people were on gear in high school, but like knowing how frustrated I was with my lack of progress at the time,
Yeah.
I probably would have been even more tempted to go on.
I knew people were on steroids because I remember when I was 16 years old and I was going to the gym for about 2 years, there were a couple kids in my school who took the Dianabol and the Anadrol from their dads. And they were
Really?
huge. Yeah, they
Oh
were
wow.
huge. They were puffy, like that you have that baby fat still on you.
Hmm.
And so yeah, I take these supplements from my dad. And it gets him big. He takes 2 in the morning. So I take 2 in the morning. They didn't know. And I would have these Dianabol boxes from Thailand with 1,000 tablets. So the dad would not be able to keep track. So the
Sure.
kids would
Yeah.
take
Yeah.
2 in the
Oh wow.
morning, 2 in the evening. The same thing the dad did. So they would take like 20 milligrams of Dianabol per day. And they were huge.
Wow.
And I realized that these kids also were full with pimples. And these guys also had libido issues because you hear, so I tried to sleep with this guy, but he couldn't get it up. Right? You hear the
Yeah. Yeah.
gossip
Right.
going around real fast. So that turned me off, actually.
Yeah.
But I think now with all the steroid information that's online, including my channel, I mean, I've met these kids at the Mr.Olympia. Um, you know, all the information to make better decisions is available. And for the kids that are willing to learn, yeah, they'll probably feel ready earlier than intended. So that might be a negative thing of talking about pharmacology, because you give the information to somebody who's not mature enough to make that decision, but now they feel that they know everything. When in
Yeah.
reality,
It's such a fine
I still
line.
have 500 videos to produce before you know
Right.
everything.
Right. Right. That's funny. Yeah. No. It's really is a fine line because there's no way like I've noticed this with anything. Like if you are watching content on a given material, like even unrelated to this, like for instance, I was looking for a new car and I started going
Mhm.
down this rabbit hole of car videos. I've never been a guy who was like a car guy, cared about flashy cars or anything, but just
Mhm.
consuming that content,
Yeah.
month goes by, 2 months, and all of a sudden I'm like finding this interest in cars that just wasn't there. And
Yeah.
so if you're just now, hey, I'm just going to learn about it. I'm just going to learn about gear, there's
Mhm.
just no way you're not going to start to kind of vet out, oh, look at this positive anecdote, look at this positive anecdote, and you start to go down that
Oh,
cycle,
you get a
no pun
confirmation
intended.
bias. Yeah.
Right. And so
Yeah.
it's tough because it's like where's the borderline of, hey, we want to educate you, but now you have this education, you think you know exactly how to do it. Hey, and like we all do, right? We all think we
Yeah.
know exactly what to do until it's 10 years later
Yeah.
and we're like, oh, maybe that wasn't the best. So I don't have the answer, obviously. I don't think
But
anybody does, but
I think you at one point when you feel comfortable with what you know, like I was researching for years, and then at 26 I felt comfortable. Now I knew nothing compared to what I know now. When I was
right.
26 and started, now I'm close to 40. I know way more. But at that time, I felt that I knew enough, and I had a great first cycle, minimal side effects, no libido issues, a little bit of acne, a little bit of water retention. Okay, I was able to mitigate that. So I knew enough to have a good outcome of my first cycle. And I think many people with my YouTube channel and other YouTube channels can have a very good outcome of their first cycle as well. But once you go into the second, third, and fourth cycle, and then starting throwing all these exotic compounds to really make gains, the only real way to learn is by getting your hands dirty. You learn on the job. You learn
Mhm.
driving a car when you bought a car and you start driving. Um, I had a very good conversation with a friend of mine, James Coolest, who has a YouTube channel about Las Vegas. And so I've been watching that for 6 months, 7 months in preparation to go to Las Vegas. And by the time I came to Las Vegas, I felt like an expert because he talked
Mm.
about everything, about the hotels, about where to eat, what to do, what not to do, right? And then I met the guy, and he said, this was the goal of the YouTube channel, to make people, for the first time you come to Vegas, you feel like a Vegas expert. And that's exactly how I felt. I was taking my wife through Vegas on a
Showing
on a
around.
guided tour. Yeah. So how do you know this restaurant is here? I said, I got it from the coolest YouTube channel. And how do you know this restaurant, this bar is there? So I got it from
Mhm.
YouTube. All right. So, and I think a lot of people watching my stuff feel the same way. I got this idea from Steve.
Yeah.
Now we're gonna inject some test. so they might feel like an expert too, but once you actually get your hands dirty, then the real knowledge starts to come, because you need information and experience for that
To
to turn
some
into
degree, I
knowledge.
think, yeah, anecdote. I made an analogy. I don't know if I said this on the podcast, but I've said it elsewhere. That just your anecdote with we talked about this with diet a little bit. It's just,
Mhm.
even as you could be as educated as you want, it still seems to supersede everything else, in the sense, like, I'll give the analogy that, again, I might have made elsewhere. So
Mhm.
I saw this doctor, and
Mhm.
she's just a eye doctor, and so she mentioned that her dad, who's also a physician, was
Mhm.
really against antibiotics. I'm sure he used them at times, but he was against
Yeah.
antibiotics. The reason being because the wife, also a doctor, had this really bad experience with antibiotics, got sick, all
Mhm.
these things. So
Yeah.
then he started going down the rabbit hole of problems with antibiotics. He now, like, teaches courses on the problems with antibiotics. And to be
Oh,
clear, I
really?
mean, there there are concerns, but obviously they've done
Mhm.
miracles. So the point is
They
that
save
one
lives.
experience,
Plenty of
of
them.
course, yeah, yeah. So, but that one experience led him to go down this whole rabbit hole and more confirmation bias, etc.
Yeah.
That same guy with the same education and all of the thousands of studies out there could have just had one different experience, which is that maybe his wife felt so much better on them, and he
Yeah.
could be a proponent saying, "Look at these
Yeah.
morons out there who don't believe in antibiotics." Just that one thing, and
Yeah.
so somebody is out there who is claiming that Tren is the nectar of the gods because when he goes on it, he just looks amazing. And somebody else is saying nobody should ever go on Tren just because
Yeah.
of their one experience. So it's just
Yeah.
interesting, the psychology of it all.
Yeah, that's yeah, the experience, personal experience, plays heavily into how people talk about these drugs. And honestly, I'm not a big fan of Tren either, because I couldn't handle my emotions. But I would still recommend it to competitors, because there's nothing like Tren. There's nothing like Tren in a contest setting. There's no replacement besides a high dose of Anavar. So yeah, it's to come back to the question, of how much of an influence drugs have on a physique. It's huge, and people who downplay it are stupid. So you say, it's just icing on the cake. That's a big fat cake. That's a lot of icing.
Right.
That's more icing than cake, and that's already a big fat cake. So I think the IFBB process, that it only makes a small amount. They wouldn't be pros without the drugs. Now, that's not discounting the work ethic, because without the work ethic and the drugs, they would not be pros either. But
Sure.
combining both, man, and genetics, yeah,
I was
that's a
going to say
pro
the
physique.
genetics. Yep.
And then 10 years of grinding, yeah, that's because I know a lot of people who take steroids and end up nowhere, and then and they take way more than IFB pros, but they don't have the work ethic, or they don't focus on their digestion, and all these little things that you need to pay attention to, and they end up with an average physique, with lagging body parts, and so there's more that goes into bodybuilding than just the drugs and the food and the training. It's yeah,
What
it's a
is
full-time job.
the longest you've gone not taking anything? No growth hormone, nothing at all.
So last year I was off cycle for 9 months, or 2 years
That's when
ago
you're
for
also
the
eating
with the
just like
non-alcoholic fatty
vegetable.
liver disease, and I honestly, it was fine. I just set my mind to, okay, now I'm not a bodybuilder anymore. I'm going to focus on business and getting myself healthy again. Which, when people listen, oh, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, it sounds so serious, but it means that you have 5 or 10% of your liver is fat. That's what it means. My
Yeah.
body fat has 15% or 10%. So that's even more than the liver has. It just means that your liver is not functioning correctly, right? Because there's too much fat and a little bit of metabolic disorder. So I had to resolve that. Plus, nobody documented that. So I saw that as an opportunity to educate people at my expense again, on how to get that resolved. So I fixed it completely, and I was off cycle for 9 months because I wanted to see how good my fertility would come back at that time as well. I could have fixed it in 4 months and then hopped right back on cycle, but I wanted to give myself some time, because I knew that a couple of years later I wanted to get my wife pregnant. So I restored my fertility fully within 9 months of going off cycle. And then I was
And
like,
what
okay,
was it like a semen analysis? What did that show? Did you get one before that 9 months?
Yeah, so my semen parameters, because I used ACG and on testosterone cycles, I still fertile. So I'm about 20, 22 million sperm per 1 milliliter, but the morphology and the motility is not so good. And then, as I did a PCT and I used some fertility medications to recover HPTA, my testosterone came back to about 600 something nanograms per deciliter, which is very comparable to where it was when I was 26. But that's in a
Yeah.
high stress environment, working my ass off and going through lawsuits and trying to get my money off the, consultancy firm that was going bankrupt and missing out on a couple of years of pension pay. So that was highly stressful. So I think my testosterone levels were lower than they should have been. So let's say I was 800 at the time, and they came back to 650, give or take. So I think that's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah.
For what, 36
They came
years
back
old.
to 600 while were you still on the HCG at that
No,
point?
it was
Or
off.
that
It was
just
off
nothing?
everything. Yeah, it
Oh,
was off everything.
okay.
Yeah, and I did that
That is quite good. Yeah.
funny icing the testicles protocol, which does work, even though
Mhm.
most people think I'm crazy. But if it works, man. And it's a freebie. You're putting
Were you
ice packs.
still losing size at the 9 month? Like, was 9 months
Oh, that was all.
smaller
My
than
size was
7
all
months?
gone because I fasted for 6 weeks. I
Right.
did a fasting
At
mimicking diet to resolve the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease because I was getting
early in the
impatient.
9 months or late in the 9 months?
About midway, yeah.
Midway.
And then so I was, I was like 82 kilos, which looked worse than
Wow.
74 kilos drug free being shredded. And
I
I
don't think
looked
I saw
even,
those. Were there pictures of that? I didn't see
yeah,
it that
they're on
small.
a hard disk, which is somewhere there. But I think they're in some of the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease videos. Yeah, they're for the
Wow.
part 5 or 6. Dude, I was emaciated. I
Because I
was,
saw pictures of you on Instagram, and it was like after this long period, and you
yeah.
were a lot smaller, but you still look great. But
Mhm.
at 180, which is like the 84 kilograms,
Yeah.
wow, I didn't realize you lost that much size.
I lost all my gains. And then I started training
Wow.
again, right? And then I was off for another 2 or 3 months, if I remember correctly, just trying to get my semen parameters back, which they ended up at 180 million sperm per 1 milliliter. So, and
Mhm.
high volume. So I was fertile AF. My doctor was like, "Oh
Yeah.
man, you can get like 20 people pregnant with this, this semen." Morphology was great, motility was great, no defects, no weird semen parameters at all. So that was just a confirmation that I knew that all of that functionality would come back. And then I started, I already started training again, but I stayed drug free for as long as it took to get those parameters back. And once I got those back, I froze that sample. So that's, laying ready somewhere just in case I need it. And then I went back on cycle and I mutated
Yeah.
within
Yeah, I'm
five
sure.
weeks. Within 5 weeks. So that's not even peak serum concentrations. I mutated.
Yeah.
That was like the best comeback ever.
Really. How much did you
Yeah,
gain?
well, I got leaner at the same time, but I think I gained like 35 pounds
Wow.
of muscle. Yeah. In like 5 weeks, 6 weeks. I
So
maybe
what do you walk
exaggerate.
around at now?
That's what it feels like.
What do you
Yeah.
walk around weight wise now? Because you said 260 was your biggest.
Yeah, about 230,
Okay.
225. Yeah.
So how do you handle that psychologically? Because that's one of the things I think would
Yeah.
be the hardest part because we are all going to decline with age, obviously.
Mhm.
But with natural bodybuilding, it really does seem like you can maintain peak levels of muscle mass until you're
Yeah,
about
far longer.
50.
Yeah,
And
far
then
longer.
and then after that, you can still have a great physique at 60. Like that, it's a much more long lasting trajectory
I
versus with
agree. I
here
agree.
you get this peak where you are Superman. And I
Getting
imagine that
gassed.
you just feel amazing. And
Yeah.
then to just know that I will never get close to that again. Do you
Mhm.
just have to, like, I don't know, how do you handle it?
So when I was resolving the NAFL deal, it was pretty hard mentally, right? Because I
Yeah.
just came from my biggest and strongest and freakiest ever. And
Mm.
the last diet that I did before that time, the pictures that I took, I mean, man, I looked like a fucking statue, you know? Yeah, great. I did like the diet before that, the year before. I looked, in my opinion, a little bit better because I felt that I got so strong that my waist kind of blew out a little bit. So the last pictures,
Mm.
some of them I was not happy with, but other pictures I was extremely happy with. That's why the back double bicep pose, right?
Mm.
That's still my
Yeah.
favorite picture of all time of myself. And that's plastered everywhere because that's like, if I were to reduce my bodybuilding journey to one picture, that would be the picture.
Yeah. That's
That would
great.
be the picture where I can look at that picture and like, man, I wasn't in great conditioning, but it was good enough to see all the muscle and how thick and dense and striated I was. So anyway, so I came off with that disease, and I realized, okay, I did this to myself. Nobody forced me to eat this much food and take this much drugs. I chose this by myself, and now I'm going to have to shrink down and fix that. Otherwise, I'm going to die. Just like all these other now, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is not going to kill you. Right? I don't have any issues with my kidneys or heart or anything immediate. But I'm mature enough to understand. Okay, I did this to myself, and now I'm going to have to, face the music, face the consequences, and resolve it, which I did. But when I resolved it, I realized that that lifestyle that I was living of the PEDs and the high food volume would bring the NAFLD back. So I took a step back. And then when I did the last two diets, I looked at myself, and honestly, I was disappointed when I got shredded. I looked at myself like, this is not what I'm used to, Because you diet so long, you train so hard, you're a little bit overtrained, you're tired, you have striations, but like the density and the quality and the fibers, they aren't there anymore compared to what you're used to. So I've had like 2 periods where I got really, really lean, and even before I went to the Mr.Olympia, I was not happy with how I looked.
Mhm.
But then again, when I go to the gym and I have a great workout, I'm still happy, and I think I'm still a great husband, and I'm still a great businessman, and I'm still easy to talk to. I mean, anybody that met me at the Mr. Olympia will say the same thing. Steve was a nice guy, so
Yeah.
that didn't go away.
Yeah.
So,
But it
okay, the
sounds like
muscle
you
will
have
go
to
away.
kind of right, but like it sounds like you kind of have to, which all of us have to check our ego at some point, regardless if
Yeah.
it's muscle or whatever else. But you kind of have to focus on something more internal, right? I just imagine it would drive
No,
because I know it would drive me nuts if it you
so
never
I
like
was like, I never thought I had a great physique. Never. I know I have a decent physique, but I never saw myself as, wow, Steve, you have a great physique. You need to compete, put it on stage, and share it with the world and inspire people, right? The results of my physique are because I like to train and I take PEDs and I take care of my nutrition. If I were to put 200% in, I would have a better physique, but that would still not be worthy of winning a show. So I always knew that, okay, I put a lot of effort in, but if I were to really want to win something and accomplish something with my physique, I would have to double or triple my efforts. And that was never worth it for me because, I see all these bodybuilders that do that. They go all in and they're broke. They can't
yeah
take care of their wife. They can't take care of their bills. And as a man, I still have a little bit of a responsibility to take care of my family. So that comes first, you know that comes first. So I realized I never went all into this bodybuilding stuff, whether that's from an effort perspective, and the physique that I was able to generate was, I think, respectable but not great. And losing that respectable physique, again, everything else remains. And yeah, I never really saw it that way, that my physique is my defining feature and the only feature of my life. That
that's good.
and a lot of people have that. Unfortunately, they look in the mirror and say, oh, that's me. No,
Yeah.
but hopefully hopefully you're so much more than a chest and a six-pack, and if
When
that's
you
not the
say
case, you really went all in. Yeah, then it's a hard pill to swallow. That's why all these pros end up dying, because that's all they are and all they have.
yeah, it's so it's when I just heard a quote yesterday, and it was actually because I mentioned before I didn't really know who Andrew Tate was, so I just watched
Mm.
one. He was on like Piers Morgan, who I also don't really know that much, but I just was like, all right, let's just see what this is
Was
about.
she
And
was she shitting on bodybuilders?
they was not, but he ended
Uh,
he ended it with saying that there's a quote, I guess, because he's a good chess player, and he said something along the lines of a well played game of chess is a sign of a gentleman, but an expertly played game of chess is a sign of a life wasted. Basically, to say that like if you get that good, it's like you spend so much time, right?
yeah.
Now, I don't think that's as true with like let's say lifting, because there's so
Uh,
like chess. You could argue is just a made up thing. So you're so good at this thing that doesn't have
it's
any.
hard.
You know,
As an outsider, I would say that chess is very hard to translate into something else.
yeah, with lifting, there's
Uh,
so many health benefits. There's so many like psychological and physical benefits. Like
yeah.
everybody sees the benefits. So I'm not saying it's
Mhm.
quite the same. I'm just saying that any endeavor, if you're trying to be the best of the best,
Mhm.
it has to become your whole
It
life.
is
Because if it's
you,
not your whole
and that's
life,
all you.
somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the fall from grace, so to speak, has to be
Mm.
harder psychologically.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, like, you and I are both pretty familiar with DC training.
Hmm.
Obviously, it's all about like progression, beating what your logbook, all this stuff. So when you say, like, to me, and this is something I'm still working on not doing as much, but like for
Yeah.
me, a quote unquote good workout almost specifically meant I beat what I did before.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Right.
that can't
Yeah.
go forever. I'm
No,
sure you
can't.
can't be as strong now as 260 blast and
Oh
everything.
no, I
So,
trained at like 75% of my maxes, so
yeah,
that's brutal, but you can still have a great workout.
that's what I'm saying. How do you define
Yeah.
that? Just like it felt good. Like, what's a good workout these days to you?
I just don't take it so serious anymore. I completely
Mhm.
let go of progressive overload because otherwise you go mental. I go to the
Right.
gym and I have fun. I take a machine that I want to do, not a machine that's written down on paper. So if I do a chest press and then I do a fly and then I do a dip and the next week I do something completely different, okay, I go close to failure or beyond failure, whatever I feel like in that moment. And I just, in that moment, I have a great time. That's all that matters right now. And
Mhm.
progressive overload you can apply to many aspects of your life, finances, relationships, assets, or lack of assets. Like you can apply progressive overload to letting how do you say this personal possessions go. Right,
Yeah.
that you things that you have in the closet that you just keep there for sentimental value. Progressive overload could be to let that go, so
Mhm.
you have less possessions, which means you have now more freedom because you're no longer your possessions, you're what you carry in here, your experiences. So I realized this a long time ago when I traveled through Asia. I can put everything that I need into a suitcase weighing 15 kilos, 32 pounds, and I can travel the world and interact with people and lose all of my gains, and I'll still have a fantastic time. But it's just different of what I'm used to. But I'll still have a
Yeah.
fantastic time. Again, the muscle doesn't define me, and I hope that a lot of people it doesn't define it for them. And otherwise, you need another hobby. I enjoy spending 2 hours with my cats every day, and if that means that I miss the gym, too bad, man. I've
Yeah.
gone to the gym for 25 years,
Well, it's a
so
great mindset. I think it's
yeah.
it's hard as you've obviously had this. I've had this. It does become a defining trait, right?
Mhm.
It's how you view yourself, and that's something that I still struggle with because I know that short of blasting something, I'm probably not going to make noticeable progress. I'm not saying I couldn't progress on this exercise or something, but
Mhm.
I'm not going to just put on heaps of muscle anymore. And
No.
I'll tell you, the most fun workouts I have. It's funny. Like, I don't have a problem taking a week off, but if I go on
Mhm.
vacation, I really enjoy working out. And one of my favorite things is, like, if we go on a
Mhm.
cruise or something, I get up early, I get a great lift in, and then I go to the
Yeah.
breakfast buffet. I have this beautiful
Yeah,
view,
yeah, yeah.
but
Yeah.
I'm doing exercises that I don't normally do. It's not a
Right.
tracked progressive overload. I'm still pushing really hard, but
Of
that's
course.
when I can really enjoy the workout.
But
And that's what
it's
I'm
like,
trying to get
yeah.
myself a little bit more
It's
into these days.
trying to go to a theme park. Right? You go to a theme park, there's something new, some rides, some this and that, and you can get the same thing from a new gym. So
Mhm.
once sometimes I get bored, I go to a random gym here in Bangkok and just do a
Mm.
workout there. Bullshit with people there that I'd never met, or that maybe watch the YouTube channel, or just people that are friendly and easy to talk to, and try all their equipment or try some new weird dumbbells. And you get a refresher that way. You do the exact same thing, but you do it somewhere different. Now you shouldn't do this when you're married. No, that doesn't apply to marriage, but it does apply to training. I know a lot of guys that think, oh, maybe I should try
I just need a
sampling this girl
refresher
somewhere else.
elsewhere.
Yeah, I need a refresher.
Spice it up a little bit. Yeah.
So if with training you can, and with diet you basically do it every week, right? You have your structured, bro food diet that is very healthy, very catered to your goals, and then Sunday you go ham and you enjoy yourself. And I don't
Yep.
think there's anything wrong with that. But you still eat within certain restrictions. So instead of eating 2 buckets of ice cream, you eat, I know, a gourmet hamburger with, the most exciting thing on there is butter and cheese. But the
Yep.
rest is stuff you already ate. It's, meat and maybe turkey bacon and some onions and some vegetables and bread. Well, you eat that during the week anyway. It's just packaged up differently, but you still have a great time.
Yep.
So I think you just people need to find balance, But I think the only way you can have balance is if you don't compete and don't take it so serious and realize that you're more than just a meathead.
Yeah.
But that's hard sometimes,
I think it's
But
something that you all have to. I think if we didn't have to come to that point ourselves, most of us never would. Like if there, we lived in a
Mm,
fantasy world where you could just keep going, like a lot of us would dive into that and it would become everything. It just
yeah,
happens to be the case that we will all die and degrade. So
yeah,
you kind of, it's like, well, this is happening. So you can either adjust your psychology
right.
and live a happier life, or you can be depressed that you're not the same as when you were 28 or something. So
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
And you can still enjoy life in other aspects. And but I think when you're drug free and you that physique is kind of steady, the entire time, and then you end up with a physique that's probably more impressive compared to the guy that's in his 70s that kind of ruined his health and
Hmm.
really had to slim down
Yeah.
and then it has like bigger body parts and smaller body parts. It's because some responded better than others to the steroids, right? When you look at those pros that are now retired, I think their physiques look worse than guys of a similar age that never touched a steroid.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure.
My waist is wide. It's not nice, you know?
Because of some of the gear, you think?
Yeah, because of some of the gear, you start dumbbell rowing, the 80-kilo dumbbells. So that's 100, 180 pounds, 190 pounds,
Yeah.
whatever. You start rowing those and you're like, yeah, you're strong and it feels right. And then after 6 months of doing that, you look at your obliques, you're like, oh, I didn't expect that to happen.
Yeah.
And they're like this wide, wider than the screen. That's how wide they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
So your physique changes, and your cranial changes a little bit. I mean, my skull is different than a drug-free
Mhm.
athlete. So all these little things add up. That's why I think people that, in later stages of life when they're 70, even if they're running a little bit TRT, they probably look worse than the guy who never took anything. Now, I can talk about this, but nobody talked about this before I got started. So these are all things you have to think about. But most people would say, I'll worry about that when I'm 70. But
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that at one point you're 70, and I'm sure I'm going to regret so many things, dude, when I'm 70. I shouldn't have never done, this and this and this and this and this and this.
Specific to the gear use or just in general in
Yeah,
life?
yeah,
Okay.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
Really?
Like right now, I'm healthy. From all the organ imaging that I've done, I'm healthier than most people my age.
Yeah.
But by the time I'm 70, I'm sure some of the things that I've done to my body will catch up. On the other hand,
Mhm.
I'll have a great story. Because, at least I can talk about, what I experienced. And then maybe, some people are still willing to listen by that time if I'm still on YouTube and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
say, oh, you shouldn't do all those peptides and experiments, and then people are like, yeah, but this is old fart now.
I think it's so interesting. I think it's going to be so interesting to age in this social media world because we have this view of our grandparents a certain way and like they just do this stuff, but it's like, yeah, but they also didn't have access to it. I have said
Yeah.
before, this is the first generation for the most part where
Mhm.
our like my grandkids will have hundreds of hours of videos of me if they want to say who was grandpa when he was in his
Yeah.
20s and 30s, like that's available. And
Yeah.
most people don't have a podcast, but most people have social media that,
Yeah.
as they get older, they'll probably clean up a little bit,
I
right?
can't
But
believe it was natural. Everybody's on steroids now.
but it's like there's so much stuff that I think it will be
Yeah.
interesting. And like, will we see guys who are 65 who are still popular on, if YouTube is still around or whatever? Like, it'll
Mhm.
just be interesting to see that. I also think from a social standpoint, it'll be a lot better because I see so many, like, I just had a grandparent pass and then I had,
Sorry.
two who were kind of isolated. And,
Mhm.
yeah, you just think like I'd like to think that when we're 70 or 80, we won't be so isolated. We'll still have these good connections. Maybe it's going to be a virtual reality kind of thing, whatever it is.
I think so because what I noticed through social media is that people in the fitness industry, nobody mentions age to each other. Like before, when I was going to, doing business, there's a lot of seniority. Right? So you're a
Oh
young
yeah.
consultant, 22 years old. You have the 40-year-old, the 60-year-olds, the guys that are close to retirement. And there's a huge gap between those people. Whereas I feel in the fitness industry, I could have just as good of a conversation with a 24-year-old that loves bodybuilding as a guy that's 60 years old. But maybe that's because
Mhm.
I'm, in between, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also see guys that are 60 interact with the 24-year-olds. Now, what other
Mhm.
industry can you find that?
Yeah.
Not that I'm aware. Maybe people that like cars or something like that. A young guy likes cars. He has financially secured to buy a Lamborghini, and the old guy likes cars. He has Maserati, and then both they can have a nice talk about the engine, right? For example. Um, but I think that the social media and the age gap minimize the age gap between the older generation and the newer generation, assuming that the newer generation isn't arrogant and the older generation isn't bitter, right? Because there's a lot of that going on. And
Yeah,
I
sure.
feel that people in the fitness industry, regardless of age, are much closer together because of social media, and
Mm.
they're easier to communicate. Like I've had, again, when I went to the Mr.Olympia, I talked to people from all age groups, and I had a wonderful conversation like we're all equal, right? Um, and I haven't found that anywhere else. But then again, I've
Yeah.
been in this field, most of my life, so
Right.
I
Right.
don't know anything about golf or
Yeah. Yeah.
Maserati, so that kind
Right.
of
Right.
stuff.
So
Yeah.
let's.
But yeah, hopefully our kids will look back at the YouTube or whatever social media platform and then have a good laugh
Yeah.
on,
Right. Probably.
yeah.
I was gonna say let's wrap up on that topic. Then going back, I know we talked about
Sure.
the Olympia early on, but
Mm,
as far as the actual like how the event and everything went, because I was talking to a few friends of mine who they my closest friends are all people I actually met in the gym, but a lot of them don't lift,
mhm.
at least not as seriously anymore.
Right.
But back in college and everything, I mean, we've actually watched the Olympia. So when I came up
Yeah.
into lifting, it was the Jay and Ronnie era, and so to me,
Yeah.
those were like Ronnie's still like the goat, and then it was kind of Kai and Phil, and
Mhm.
those were the ones we actually watched live. And
Right.
then honestly, it's weird to me now that I've watched the last people of those eras step away. Like
Mhm.
Phil Heath is pretty much finally out. I mean,
Yeah, I
maybe he'll
think
do a
so. Yeah.
comeback, but
Mm.
so all of those guys are now like Rolly's pretty much done. Like that era is kind of ending, and I
Mhm.
don't really follow as much. Like I mean, I know who Nick Walker is. I know who these
Mhm.
people are, but I'm not following them nearly like back then.
Right.
So I don't have as much of an opinion on the placings, but I know that a lot of people thought Rami was going to win based on like the first night,
I
and
thought so
then
too. Yeah.
so what do you think about the placings overall?
I thought it was fair. Finally. I mean, going into the show, I figured, Rami was going to win based on his previous
Mm.
appearances, but he was, dude, it was sloppy. He was so
Yeah.
sloppy when I saw him, and of course the prejudging was 2 hours later than intended or 4 hours later than intended. So a lot of people must have spilled or they missed their peak or whatever. But
So
if
he was sloppy
everybody
both
meets,
nights to you?
yeah. I
Yeah.
was sitting in the back row because I had no idea how the auditorium looked. So I sat all the way in the back. And then Rami walked out and he did a side chest. And I could see that scar tissue all the way in the back. And
Mm.
I'm like, man, that doesn't look good. And I saw that he was spilled and I saw that he was soft. So I figured they did the fill and spill and he spilled so much that they used diuretics to pull him down. And then all the water
Mm.
retention is still in the skin. And the muscle starts to deflate. So they're just brutally missing your peak. Yeah, and then you slide all the way down to fifth. And honestly, I had Samson Dauda over Rami,
Mm.
100%. I talked with Milo Sarcev afterwards at finals, and I walked straight up to him and said, I had Samson Dauda in fifth over Rami, if not higher. And he's like, yeah, well,
Mm.
politics. Okay. So we had a
Wow.
good talk about that. And I thought Brandon Curry could have been lower. You just sloppy also, just over full, no striations, no detail, which he never
Yeah.
really had. And then Nick, I'm happy that he moved up 2 spots. I felt that there was something off about his physique, but again, he did look overall improved compared to 2 years ago. I felt that he was conditioned, but also soft. It's hard to explain. It's like
What
his
do you
skin
make
was a
of
little bit.
the veins he gets? Like his crazy varicose veins on his legs.
I think it's just something genetic. And then,
Yeah.
with the pharmacology involved, it looks worse. And then, of course, when you pull your skin down to, millimeter level, it's going to shrink wrap around those veins. And varicose veins, they impair blood flow, right? So the blood kind of sinks and bulges them because the valves in the arteries don't work correctly. So he might have no arms in it or no veins in his arms. And then the varicose veins in his legs that will be bulging, and then you shrink wrap that with thin skin and diuretics, yeah, it's going to look like that. Now, that's something we'll have to address, but I don't think it detracts from his physique. I mean, his physique is freaky. It will never be aesthetic. His waist is way too wide, but he can be like a Marcus Rule
Yeah.
and bring the nasty every show, which is certainly what he did. I mean, he walked out and I almost fell out of my chair.
Yeah.
So, and that's sitting in the back row. And same with Samson Dauda. The guy walks out and he starts posing and it's all beautiful and he's twice the size of any other aesthetic guy. So yeah, those are showstoppers. And then, of course, Derek Lunsford was amazing, even though he still has a little bit of muscle maturity to work on. And then
Derek's
Hadi
been
was
around for a long time.
yeah, but I mean, his muscularity is far exceeds anybody his age. I mean, the guy's mid 20s, 26 years old.
Derek's only wait, really?
Yeah, I think he's freaking young, or 28 or something like that.
Really? Maybe I'm thinking of somebody else then. Okay.
Derek and Nick is also quite young, about I think about the same age. I don't know. I don't follow it that closely. Like Hadi
Yeah.
Chupan, he's like close to 40s, maybe even older
Right.
than I am. I remember him from the amateur circuit when he was my size, and he was the nicest guy to talk to backstage. He was so happy to be there and finally getting out of Iran, and being with the Iranian national team. Yeah, a super nice guy. I met him in
He and who's the really short
Thailand.
African guy? I'm blanking on his name right now.
Kevin English?
No, he had that little there's just like a little thing on stage where they were bumping each other's elbows. What is his name? He's like super short African guy.
The guy that lived in England, or was it the 212?
No. This was on. He and Hadi. Hadi was kind of like pushing his elbow. It was kind of reminiscent of like the Phil and Kai little spat.
Oh, you mean William Bonac?
Yes.
Yeah. So William doesn't back down. I used to train at the same gym as him. He is the one who retired Louis Marco.
Yeah.
Yeah, William doesn't take shit off anybody.
Yeah,
no way. So Hadi is very competitive, right? And Heidi's like, "Let me in. Let's do this pose." And William's like, "Get out of here."
Yeah.
It's just William normal.
Was he like 9th or so? He was pretty low, right?
Yeah, he was quite off. Yeah, I don't know where Chad Nichols was, but he wasn't in the rooms peaking his athletes.
Yeah, interesting.
Sorry to say, Chad, but you were not there for your athletes. Otherwise, they would have looked better. I mean, he missed the mark horribly with both of these guys. And I do know that they looked way better. I don't think Rami would have won based on, his lagging body parts, his, triceps and back and,
well, also, you see this with a lot of these guys, I guess it's just the years of gear. You look at their old pictures compared to new, they lose the definition. It's just an freshness, look.
Pop, Yeah. No, it's tough, man. I mean, it does take a lot of pressure on your physique. And of course, as the health of your liver and kidney diminishes, you can't peak anymore. That's the downfall of most of these older guys. That's why I always tell people do 1 or 2 shows per year, because otherwise you just burn out faster. I want to do the Arnold Classic and the New York Pro and the Mr. Olympia. You'll be done by 35. Just do 1 show per year.
Does it seem like it's? I mean, in some cases, clearly they missed their peak. But some of these pictures, like a 2011 Phil Heath versus most recent, like something changes almost with the muscle belly, like the quads. You see it a lot where they just don't have that same level of striation.
With Phil Heath, I think he had intestinal strangulation, so he was not able to absorb and digest the food properly. And you still need your digestive tract to work for all the nutrients to get into your muscle, and whether that's for loading for a contest or the entire off season and entire contest prep, if that builds up over months or years, the physique is just going to, it's like you put like some sort of blood flow restriction on an organ, or the blood that goes into the organ has no real nutrients inside. So I think at one point, nerve damage, intestinal issues, digestive issues, that just does you in. And then injuries on top of that, which usually manifest when you get older because your organs are not processing correctly. And at one point it does you in. But a lot of these guys, they have nothing else, so they keep going. Like Rami, I don't know much about the guy, but he said he was going to come back next year. But he's been going down for the last 3 years. The last time he looked really, really good was when he was working with Chris Aceto. And that's a long time ago.
Aceto seems to do pretty well by everybody.
Yeah, he's brutal with his diets.
Yeah.
He just suffers them down, and then it needs a lot of diuretics, from what I heard.
Do you follow Classic as much? It seems like Chris Bumstead is pretty much the most popular guy overall.
Dude, Classic bodybuilding is the new bodybuilding that I love.
Yeah.
All these guys are nice. All these guys are approachable. They're not arrogant at all. I had a podcast with Wesley Vissers, one of the nicest guys ever.
Really?
I met Urs Kalsinski twice, I think, at the Mr. Olympia. And first it was at the meet and greet, so I shook his hand. He's like, "Hey, Steve, where are you going?" I'm like, did I hear that correctly? He knows my name. right?
Mm.
So I told him, I went to the bathroom and said, dude, just focus on the show. I need you to place top three. You're like, I'm a big fan. So just get into the top three. It's like, yeah, okay. And then a
Yeah.
little bit later, I met him at Caesar's Hotel at the Cheesecake Factory, right? That's what all the foreigners go to. So Wesley
Mhm.
Vissers was there. We chatted a little bit. And then I met Urs on the way out. We had a good chat. And his coach, Steven Kinzel, boss of Outlaw on Instagram. And all these guys are so friendly, man. Way more friendly, way nicer than the open pros.
Really?
That's why they're popular. They look great. They present themselves well. They look healthy. They're approachable. They're great with the fans. They stay there until the end, and that's
Mm.
basically what '90s bodybuilding was all about, right? We had the
Yeah.
magazines, and then this big event where everybody came together. And what I see now is that a lot of the open pros are a little bit socially awkward, or they're too halo tested up, or too trend up to meet the fans. But that's stupid because it's a fan-driven sport.
Right.
That's your job to meet these people. Even if it's maybe a little bit awkward or you're tired, without interactions with the fans, they will all talk and they'll all say, "Oh, this guy was not fun to talk to." And now watch your discount code sales
Yeah.
plummet.
Yeah.
Watch them plummet. So,
Right.
and these classic physique guys, they're great. They're nice. They're approachable. They're super cool to talk to, and they're
Nice.
as much of a fan of the sport as the fans that are there.
Mm.
So, I met a ton of these guys, and I honestly think that classic physique is the future, unless they start rewarding guys like Derek Lunsford and Samson Dauda and Regan Grimes, and man, what's that guy from Brazil that trains with Flex Lewis? I even had a picture with him, Rafael Santoa. No, not
Mm.
Santoa. Fuck, that's a scumbag. Rafael Brandeo.
Okay. Yeah.
And all these guys, they have great physiques. It flows really nice. It looks fresh. No side injections. No weird muscle tears. No bubbly stomach. Once they start rewarding those physiques in the open class, Andrew Jack, also great physique.
Yeah.
Then I think open bodybuilding will change for the better. But that might still take some time.
Yeah. I think it makes sense that they'd have the two different categories, and that, like, I heard what Arnold was saying, that, like, why do we need a whole new division for this? Like, that's what bodybuilding should be. But I think it's fine that there's one that's like, hey, this is basically what's the most aesthetic, and then this is just like the biggest mass monster. I think that's
Mhm.
fine. But obviously, most people, the classic physique is going to be much more appealing, right? Like, nobody really
Yeah.
wants to look like Rami.
No, and neither did I. So when I started bodybuilding, all that we had was Ronnie and Jay, right? And that was it looked so unobtainable. I mean, I met
Mhm.
Jay after 2006. He came to Holland. He had a seminar there, and I looked at him. I'm like, I can never be this size.
Mhm.
And then you already kind of give up mentally, like, why am I even bodybuilding? That was before I touched any steroid, and I was like, what is it going to take for me to look like this? But I think if I had classic physique as an aspiration point, and Chris Bumstead would have been the face, then I would be like, you know what, this is realistic, even though his physique is crazy. It's not
Mhm.
realistic at all, but it looks more attainable than Jay
From a
Cutler's
size
physique.
standpoint,
Yeah,
sure.
from a size standpoint. And trust me, when you meet him in real life, he's huge too.
I was going
And
to say, I'm
he's
sure he's
3D.
still massive. Yeah.
I met man, another Brazilian guy that's in classic that got second. I forget all these names now. I met him at Dragon Lair gym. Right, and he
Mhm.
looked about my size, and I took a picture with him, posted it on Instagram, and got a good response out of that. But he was shredded, and I
Yeah.
was getting fluffy from a week of eating.
Mhm.
So that realistically wise, size wise, I would say that that's more attainable, but also more enjoyable to walk
Yeah.
around as, because I've been 260, and that's not very enjoyable to be at, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine what 300 pounds would feel like.
Right.
To be snoring awake, sitting upright.
Yeah. Right.
So now I'm very happy with classic physique, man. I'm very happy with classic. I think it's a great addition to the sport. I think that wellness and bikini should have been combined into a single
Mm.
class, because
Yeah.
wellness is too chunky and bikini is too skinny.
Mm.
But that I'm biased because my wife would, when she competed, she was like right in the middle of bikini
Right.
and
Right.
wellness. Yeah, like those thick thunder legs, but still lean and a good booty, but bigger than bikini. So that's what I
Yeah. Yeah.
prefer.
Sure.
But I'm biased towards that. Um, and I think they should combine figure and athletic physique. because there's no posing. It's just a waste of time. I like how
Uh,
they look, but the whole setup of the class, it's just such a giant waste of time. Just combine figure with athletic physique, and because they're almost the same size anyway,
yeah.
and then let that run. So I think they can compress the female classes into bikini wellness. Right? That's one class. Then figure athletic, and then bodybuilding, and then fitness. So that's 4 instead of 7 classes.
Yeah. It's a lot.
And then bodybuilding is 212 open and classic. All right, done. Men's
Yeah.
physique, sorry, but you should just do classic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the show would run smooth, Then the prejudging wouldn't start at 11 o'clock, and everybody would miss their peak, and all the bodybuilders would be upset and start complaining and stuff.
Right.
You got to be compete at the amateur ranks. It's way worse.
Right. All right, man.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll see you at the next one. Orlando is definitely doable for me.
Come.
So
It'll be an
see
eye
about that.
opener. You'll have a great time, man. You'll meet all these people that actually watch your stuff, and then you're like, man, I can't believe that so many people actually watch what I'm doing, and they'll be fired
Right.
up.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
All right. Well, like I said, I know we're going to split this up. I guess we'll figure out who's going to be on, part 1, part 2. But I guess we'll just end
I'll
with you
take part
first.
2, so I don't have to regurgitate Lyric King stuff in my channel anymore. Ugh.
Sure. Yeah. All right. So then this is on your channel. I'll just say, all right, come over to part 1 on my channel, Brains and Gains, and we can put in a little thing for you on my channel as well.
Yeah. We'll put it back and forth. All right, it was great to talk to you. I'll try to catch up with you within this year again. All right. And otherwise, we'll just make it yearly.
Perfect.
Right. All right. Hey, man, I'll talk to you soon. Have a good evening. Good day.
All right, man.
And
you too.
I'll catch up. Take care.
Talk
Ciao.
soon.